I've been doing the State of Black Asheville with my students at UNC Asheville since 2007, 2006-2007 school year. And this is the first time I've ever tried to do it virtually without my students. And I thought I'd start off with the population changes, the demographics. And this one slide is enough to kind of tell the story of what's happened over the last 20 years in Asheville, is that something is going on with population growth. I mean, you can tell by the traffic, you can tell by the patterns of housing that are going on, the numbers of new buildings that are being constructed. But when you look at things through the lens of race, it often takes on a different characteristic. The population, we first came here, being at 17-18%, by the turn of the century, by 2000 census, it had dropped to 13.4%. This 2020 census, we are now at 10.7% of the city being African American. We can expect our population to grow significantly over the next 10, 20 to 30 years. I've seen projections to go from now, we have a total of 97,000 people in the city. I've seen projections that place us in 20 years at 150,000. I've seen projections that place us in by 2040, 2050, next 30 years, closing in on 175 to 200,000. That's hard to imagine. That's hard to imagine. But when we talk about race, that's not what we are experiencing. African Americans are leaving the city, and they are not necessarily relocating into the county. They're leaving the region. And tonight I want to talk about maybe some reasons why they would leave, why Black folk would leave the region. Let's look at education first. If you go to this website, the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction's DPI, you'll see the reports that characterize every school system in the state of North Carolina. This particular address will take you directly to Asheville City Schools. And so one of the areas I thought I'd present to you tonight is the area of discipline. Since the academic performances were so disrupted by the pandemic, it felt as though we were piling on, adding to troubles. Let's look at referrals instead. And what you see here are that 41% of the referrals are Black, 33% are white, 27% multiracial. And you say, what do I have to compare that to? Well, before the pandemic, Asheville City Schools and Mecklenburg schools were under federal observation for a while. And the feds decided to go towards Mecklenburg as opposed to Asheville City Schools because we were having upward of 75% of referrals being represented by African-American students. And let me repeat that. 75% of African-American students, 75% of African-American students at some point were receiving in-school or out-of-school suspension. They're being written up by teachers and sent to the office or off campus. This looks like it's a tremendous improvement over the 75%. However, before the pandemic, reports were given by race, by Black and white. This report, which represents how reports will be coming out in the future, is done by Black, white, and multiracial. What it does not say are by what race are multiracial identifying. And so if we look at multiracial as being a way of also looking at another component of our Black community, we find that we have not improved very much in terms of the racial distinctions of referrals. We're back up to the 68, nearly 70% of those referrals being students of color. We're going to housing. And this is one of the things. This photograph is one of a series of photographs that was taken as we address urban renewal as one of the reasons why home ownership is so skewed. If you take a quick look, you'll see this house, and you see this man, this white man, nice tie, holding up a chalkboard. And these kids are just looking. The children are just out playing and they're just looking. He is actually documenting homes that are to be razed, that are to be torn down. And these children have no idea that that's what's actually going on. During those early 60s and during the 1960s, 1970s, and 80s, when people were dislocated, offers were made. Homeowners were given compensation and supplements that could range up to $15,000. Renters were often given some support, but not enough to make it really useful. To rebuild was costing generally $10,000 to $15,000 more than what you could have realized at maximum when you were compensated for your home. The promise of urban renewal was coupled with the promise from the federal government of model cities. And so urban renewal and model cities, urban renewal was this removing of urban blight, and model cities was the replacement with brand new houses and infrastructure and residences and businesses. And so we were looking at, this is a good deal. For a few years of dislocation, we can move back into a brand new neighborhood. Of course, that never happened. Now, I say that as a precursor to this, and these are a series of maps that were affected by urban renewal. And it's not that I want you to locate your place in this map. That's not the point of this map. The point of this map is actually the small writing here. Homes and businesses and churches and schools that were affected within those urban renewal areas in this part of town. And so you see grocery stores, hospitals, you see beauty shops and barber shops, churches, and of course, a number of homes and neighborhood centers. Now, this map, the location of Black folk and populations in the city. And if we look closely, you're going to see this southeast quadrant of the city that looks blank. There are no Black folk there. Isn't that amazing? Look, it must be a huge lake there or something. Maybe it's something natural that we're all looking at. No, this is the southern side of the Biltmore Estate historically. And in the 1920s, it was turned into a township of Biltmore Forest, in which it was separated from Asheville City as it stands today. But the reason why I bring this up under housing is for a couple of reasons. One is that the African Americans who lived here were dislocated. They were bought, sometimes coerced, but definitely moved to the western side of Hendersonville Highway today, into what we know as Shiloh. But this side here declared itself independent and free as it Biltmore Forest Township. A second reason why we see this as being interesting, Black folk are here, is because of that. Now, I know you can't see it, I know, but this yellow part right here helps to explain why Black folk were not necessarily in all parts of the city. And it says, let me read it to you, no part of the property described above. This is a deed in 1925 for property in Montfort. But no part of the property described above or any interest therein shall be sold, leased, or otherwise disposed of to any Negro or any person's firm or corporation for the use of any Negro. These are this covenant, this restrictive covenant was outlawed. It was declared unconstitutional in 1948 by the U.S. Supreme Court. However, the restrictive covenants continue to appear and to be enforced. Throughout the entire country. And the restrictive covenants yielded the map that you see today, because Biltmore Forest did not sell, buy, lease, or otherwise have a building that's for the use of any Negro. Even today, that population is virtually zero. If you look at homes that are owned, this section here might be a little difficult to read. At the bottom of it are home values, and it goes from less than $10,000 to over $1 million. And the blue bars are white people who own the homes. The green bars are Black people who own the homes. And the homes that are of lesser value are predominantly owned by African Americans. The homes of greater value are owned by whites. Let's look at the income. Now, in 2017, I was asked to do a presentation on the state of Black Asheville to Buncombe County commissioners. And this was one of the slides that was presented in 2017, and it's average monthly earnings. And we find that in average monthly earnings, when we look at economic mobility as another area for the state of Black Asheville to investigate, we find that there was a gap of nearly $1,000 a month. These are the monthly earnings in 2020 as collected by the IT department of the city of Asheville. And if you look closely, what you'll find is that the information they provided in 2015 compared to 2015, we see $2,324 being earned by Black workers. For 2020, we find $2,252 being paid for Black workers. And what that means is that in the course of nearly 5 years, we have actually had a decline in earnings for Black people, while simultaneously looking at an increase in the monthly earnings for white employers. You see whites at $3,459, and we find $3,600. And now healthcare. This one was surprising in terms of healthcare. The percentage of disabled in Asheville, 61% of those who are disabled in Asheville are Black. Yes, the stress takes a toll. Harsh living, it takes a toll. And you say, maybe you should go to the doctor. Well, we are going to the doctor. And so we have to say, what kind of medical care are we receiving? We're covered. Nearly 90% of us have some type of insurance. Look at the numbers of physicians. Look at our physician demographics in Buncombe County. 1.94% of all physicians are Black versus 6.3% of the county's population being Black. You say it shouldn't matter, but it does matter. Justice. We were able to get the demographics for the first time in a State of Black Asheville report of the officers for APD. And we look at 4.9% being female, 7.1% being male, being African-American. And this is the result. This is what I wanted to get to, is the traffic stops. You want to make a connection, and it should take more research, and I'm hoping we can do that research at some point, that officers, it matters the person driving and the officer who is stopping. Because we see that despite being only 11% of the population, actually less than 11% of the population, and we represent 21% of traffic stops. If you do this by gender, it's even more skewed. And once we are stopped, once the stop occurs, 43% of those who are searched are Black, as opposed to, again, let me remind you of the percent in the population.